6 PM and approved the agenda at that time and immediately went into executive session to discuss the superintendent's job performance and contract. I'm pleased to report that we're making significant progress there, and it's the board's full intent to keep our superintendent on. So we'll get a contract done here very quickly. With that, we move on to comments from the public. As we do at the beginning and end of every meeting, we have an opportunity for people from the public to comment. If there's anybody who would like to speak, that would be your opportunity. Okay, seeing none, we move on to the consent agenda. Has everybody had a chance to look at the consent agenda?
Yes.
Any questions or comments? We have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained? None? Passes unanimously. We move on to reports and recognition. Board Chair's report. I just have to say how pleased I am with the turnout for the election. It was really nice to have a definitive vote of above 15% and to see that the budgets passed by a favor of 2-1. So that was pretty exciting to see. It's a tremendous tribute to the work that all of you as administrators, principals, I was going to say superintendents, assistant superintendents, teachers, and support staff do every day. It's a wonderful school district, and we cannot thank you enough for all that you do. For that, Dr. Smith?
Great, I have several items. I'd like to do a little show and tell. Up on the screen, we have the video that the Wilton Economic Development Council created. It was just released within the last 24 hours.
Oh, yeah, I
And
just
so
watched it.
some of the students here at the school, some of the staff that were supporting Jenny Wong and the EDC in the creation, I think you're going to find it really captures the tone and the spirit and what makes Wilton unique. So if you don't mind, we'll take 2 minutes and take a look at it. audio narration
There-
that didn't,
yeah.
for whatever
Yeah.
reason, didn't come through. But watching it, do you get the sense of what this community is about?
The narration is great.
The
With it.
narration
is fantastic.
It's awesome.
So my
It's great
first,
without the narration.
But yeah. So we'll post it to our website as well, and really pleased with the work that they've done, and we've been really happy to partner with that group as they continue their efforts to promote what a fabulous community this is, and try to continue to attract new residents. And I was particularly pleased. You hear it in the audio narration, but as the narrator's describing, all of the wonderful attributes of the community, it intentionally lands on the schools towards the end of the video and really showcases the really broad and enriching, entire curriculum that we offer, kids pre-K 12. So kudos to the EDC and Jenny Wong in particular. Just an update. As I've updated the board at previous meetings, I continue to have ongoing conversations through faculty fora with the various teachers across the district. This afternoon, we spent about an hour with a group of high school faculty, and we continue to engage in conversations about ways that we can support them and support their work and address the needs and the stresses that they're feeling. And one of the themes that's has emerged early on and continues to repeat itself is this real desire to slow down a little bit and to tap the brakes on so many of the initiatives we have underway and really focus on nurturing some of those relationships and helping teachers create space so that they can get really good at the work that's directly in front of them. And that's a commitment that I've made, a commitment that our leadership team has made, and we're going to continue to discuss that in earnest as we move forward, and with the expectation that as we roll into next year, teachers will have some substantially different kinds of support in place that enable them to have a little more time and space and feel more directly the support both from Chuck and from me, but from the administration as a whole. So I'll continue to update the board on those conversations. Just three other things quickly. I don't know if you saw it this week, but I wanted to just offer kudos to my two new friends at Cider Mill, Drew and Mimi, who are in Cannondale House, and earlier this year they came forward to their teacher, Jackie Levenhurst, with the idea to update the library, the classroom library. So they created this whole house-wide book drive. They owned the entire thing, soup to nuts, worked with Jason Greasley to put together a raffle, and I think they have collected 150 to 200 books.
210.
Yeah, 200, how many? 210?
210.
210, so phenomenal.
As of this afternoon.
So
When they shared with me that they met with you.
Yeah,
and
it's just great. So this is the kind of entrepreneurial spirit and innovation that we want to nurture from our younger students, and these two girls. In the conversation I had with them, what I loved was their first concern was creating more work for the teachers. So they went and tracked down Lisa Hibbard in the media center and said, we can't have the teachers be in charge of these books. We have to learn how to level them, and so would you teach us how to do that? So they've spent I don't know how many of their lunch periods doing that work. And in talking to Lisa, she's loved having them in the media center and listening to their conversation as they're doing this work. But just another simple example of our kids stepping forward as leaders, with problems that they see and coming up with solutions to address them, and then being supported by our teachers. So great job to Drew and Mimi. Along the same lines, this afternoon at the high school, they held their psychology expo. And so a number of juniors and seniors presented research that they had done on a range of issues. These were student-generated by interest. So some students explored schizophrenia, others relationship preferences, others the influence of music on mood. But they conducted some in-depth research and put together presentations and synopses of the research with really interesting findings. And it was just another, again, example of the curriculum coming to life for kids in ways that was personalized to them and really tapped into their research interests. So congratulations to Bob and the staff for putting that together. Last piece. So last week I attended a meeting with a group of superintendents from the region, and we've all, in our own respective communities, been confronting issues and concerns around student well-being,
student stress, student alcohol and drug use. And so we got together last week to just kind of share stories and get a sense of how each of our respective school districts and communities were responding to those concerns. And what we've committed to is really working together as a region. So I'll be meeting with that group again later in June, and we're going to come forward with a series of proposals that we'll bring before this board, and they'll bring before their respective boards, and try to connect our staff so that way we can tackle some of these issues as an entire region rather than as isolated communities, and see if we can leverage our resources together to really help raise awareness for our students. Okay.
Wonderful, thank you very much. Laura, anything?
Yeah, we met today and we talked to Fran and the curriculum coordinators about some of the things they're doing at Meadowbrook. And just kind of a general conversation, like state of the union, state of Chuck's office, and, you know, just, saying there's a lot going on, and there's already, we're moving forward with science standards and the social emotional committee work, and as well as, everything else that's already been set in motion, like social studies and ELA, and which is always getting changed, and the math stuff. And I just wanted to do a shout out to Corey for his excellent speaking at the town meeting. Is he downstairs? Is that where he is? But anyway, that was just so wonderful, to hear him. And my husband and I quote him all the time because it's like, just laughing at the idea that he used to be normal size. We don't really believe it. But I just think it was just impressive and that he did that, and is, and thank you, Dr. Smith, for having such a good relationship with everyone. And that was really fun to see. So sorry for that. I just had to.
Thank you very much.
We're passing notes.
Anything
Nothing to
Ed?
add, no.
Glenn?
No, we have not met. The upcoming building committee meeting for Miller Driscoll is, I think, next Thursday, and the ops committee has not met. I was at Miller Driscoll the end of last week, and it's just amazing the work they're doing. I mean, it's really coming along. It's fantastic. It really is.
I was tied to that. I was stopped by a parent in the village market the other day whose first child went through Miller Driscoll prior to the renovation, and second child just did introductions to the school this past week, and she said what an amazing facility, but even more exciting group of staff members that she met, and the entire mood of the whole school was so warm, uplifting, engaging, and she and her child were absolutely thrilled to be going. So kudos.
You sense it walking through there. There's an energy there. It's just, I think when we have our public opening at the end of the summer, before school starts again, the plans are to have the school a couple of days where anybody from the public can go through and get a tour. They'll see that the investment has been well spent, and it is just a great environment. It's fun to be there. It really is.
That's nice. Thank you. Chris?
Policy committee met earlier this week. We have many policies in the pipeline that we'll be bringing to you soon. I would like to mention that Chuck chaired a meeting of the district nutrition committee the other day, and on the agenda was consideration of the district nutrition and physical education policy. And the reason I'm mentioning it is because it's just a wonderful way to look at rethinking our district's policy. In that group was a committee consisting of educators from each of the schools, nutrition teachers and physical fitness teachers, and there were parents, and there were dietitians. One of the parents is a dietitian, but in addition, people from Chartwells were there. So it was just everybody in that room who has some expertise and some strong thoughts on that topic, writing this policy together. So we'll be bringing that to you in a couple of weeks in final form, but, thank you to Chuck for convening that group, and, it's just really exciting to be a part of it. So thank you.
Thanks for your help.
Well,
It's
I
helped a
don't know
lot.
about that, but,
One of the things I found ironic about that process, and you can speak more intelligently to it than I can, is the school, or the district gets approximately $60,000 a year in grants from the government if we follow their nutritional guidelines And if, the irony is, if we actually gave up that grant, we would be given flexibility to improve the nutritional caliber of the food that we're delivering in our cafeterias. Is that an accurate statement?
Yes, I think there are some neighboring districts who have gone down that, that way of doing things. I don't know, Chris, we talked a little bit about it at the committee. I think it's something we should look at, but it's not something I think you can just do quickly.
Right, interestingly, our Chartwell's nutritionist also works in Weston, and she said their community voted to get rid of the school lunch program. So starting in the fall, they can do whatever they want, and they're all very excited about it, because a lot of the school lunches were ending up in the trash. Because as Brian made the point, the federal school lunch guidelines are so rigid that he can only sell one type of soup that is so tasteless, he can't sell it. He has to just sort of throw it in with a sandwich, like, oh, here's your grilled cheese and take the soup, please. Whereas if we had the flexibility to put the types of things that tasted good and were nutritious, the kids would be a lot happier. So we were talking about, well, I think in this town, parents just sort of know that we're on the school lunch program and think, it is what it is, and that there's no option to change things. So maybe if we started a conversation, we might find out that people do want to change. Of course, the high school is not on the school lunch program, so we're talking K through 8 with this. But it might be something, something, we just touched on it at the committee, but I think we were all a little surprised.
Yeah. Something worth exploring.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. So my math teacher from high school doesn't get mad at me. When I was running the ratios in my head on the election, I believe it's more like 3-2, not 2-1, so in case somebody comes back and attacks
Thank you
me
for
on that.
clarifying that.
Yes, I don't know if you wanted to cover that.
Oh, yeah, the note was just, I think we had discussed Jackson at the last board meeting as well, but Jackson Walker, one of our high school students, who was selected as a presidential scholar. Yeah, I think we ought to invite Jackson, to maybe do the next meeting, just so we can commend him publicly. He's another outstanding Wilton High School student who's going off to Harvard in the fall.
He's going to be recognized before all the Fairfield County secondary school principals, I want to say on May 31st, and he and Brooke Amadei will introduce each other and pay tribute to each other as our scholar leaders. So another award for Jackson, but also, Brooke is a tremendous leader in our school. We're looking forward to that.
Wonderful. And then, Dr. O'Donnell, you had, 37 students today pose for their photograph?
Yes, we did. College bound, also scholar athletes, celebrating their future college opportunities and the sports they're playing. And it's a very nice annual tradition now to acknowledge them, and they're very excited.
How does 37 compare to most other years?
That's a bigger number than I remember. Yeah, that's a lot.
Pretty
Because I've
impressive.
gone to that just about every year, and I don't remember having 37 before. So
That's a lot.
A lot of
It's a good
Division
number.
One, a lot of Division One, couple of Division Two, and a number of Division Three as well. So very exciting. And some Ivy League schools as well.
Anyone going to Syracuse?
Nobody's going to Syracuse.
Yeah, we did see some orange in there. I was coloring my face in a second. So we now move on to the Wilton High School NEASC report. It's on for review and discuss.
Such a proud papa.
That was fun. That was
Yeah,
fun.
enjoy it.
37 kids.
Yeah, I think it's a big number.
It's
more
more
than,
than
yeah,
Division
yeah.
One.
That's a lot of Division One. I love it.
And the schools, I mean, Division One, Division Two, Division Three, they're all great schools. It was awesome. Really neat to see.
You guys have sound, I turned it down.
we're going to make this on.
Great. Looking forward to it.
So as we get ready to begin, Mr. Likely and members of the Board of Education, we have a gift for you this evening. We just received from the association, the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, our certificate of accreditation from none other than Executive Director George Edwards. Having met the requirements for accreditation, Wilton High School is hereby granted full and continued accreditation. So we actually had it framed,
That's fantastic.
and we thought we'd award it to the Board of
Very
Education
nice.
this evening. And
Congratulations.
if you want, you could put it with the other awards over there, so if you so choose.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
So that's for our board chair and our esteemed Board of Education. Thank you for your support throughout the entire process, sincerely.
Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome.
That's wonderful.
So we have Greg Theriot here with us this evening, who of course is one of our assistant principals. And also, you will note that Greg was one of our co-chairs, our steering committee chairs of the NEAS process. His leadership along with Jim Hunter was so instrumental, so we're glad to have Greg on our team. And you may not recognize Christian McCarthy, who is here for two reasons tonight. He's actually doing his internship with me, shadowing, getting his 092 as a principal. And he is also one of the members of the follow-up committee. So Christian, thanks for being here. So you will recognize this document here as our core values and belief statement and our vision statement. This document is, of course, truly the fabric and the underpinning of what we do through all of our decisions and our program development at the high school. We developed this document through a very collaborative process. We've got the vision statement that you'll see very soon is very much aligned with the district vision statement. We recognize the hallmarks here of inquiry and scholarship and empathy. The core values and beliefs, these are truly beliefs about how we believe members of the school community should interact with each other in effective ways, support each other, and really I think also represent some of the hallmarks of a true Wilton High School education. Finally, these are our 21st century learning expectations. Schools typically have 2 to 4, and these are the ones that we have designated as the expectations that we will seek to measure throughout what is now a decennial process until our next NEAS accreditation, which sneaks up pretty quickly. So this document, what I want the board to know is that we use this document to drive decisions. It's a lens through which we look at when we're looking at developing programs. I try to begin presentations with it. We have situations where we have students who may have fallen short of the school expectations. We may show them this document, let them reflect upon it, and talk about where they may have fallen short. And as we go to hire teachers now, teachers and staff members in the impending hiring season, we'll present that document to them as one of the questions, give them time to reflect, and then ask them to say, what does this mean to you as a prospective Wilton Public Schools employee? So it's a live document, and we are using it, and we think it's very important in the school. Okay, slide. So this is our little agenda tonight. We're going to make this a relatively crisp presentation. We're going to share with you some of the commendations we received, some common themes around the recommendations. The commendations very much really outnumbered the recommendations, but we really want to focus on the recommendations. There's no complacency here. We really want to push the agenda forward with the accreditation process. So we'll talk about some of the recommendations. We'll talk about next steps. Christian will talk about the follow-up committee because he served on it. And you'll see when we display that side, it's a good representative group that I think knows the school, is inculcated in what we're trying to do, and really they've been very helpful in the process. Greg will illuminate the 2-year plan, and I'll draw some brief conclusions for the Board of Ed tonight. Slide. So some of the commendations, the core, I should backtrack a little bit. NEASC has 7 standards, and we're going to show you a few commendations from each one, actually 3. So core values and beliefs is the first standard in the process. One of the commendations, as I talked about, was that this vision that we have is very much aligned with the district vision. When we had some new leadership in the district, we took some of the current work that we had already done, and we really melded it with our new vision, and I think that they really are synergistic somewhat in the way they support each other. We did involve multiple stakeholders in this process. We actually had teachers from all of the disciplines, we had parents from the PTSA, we had parents at large, we had students. So it was really an inclusive process. As I reflect back, I was thinking about this the other day. Our very own Maria Coleman was included as our associate principal at the time. She'll remember that. Maria was there. So a lot of stakeholders involved, and you'll remember when we wanted to vet this document and this process, we did share it with the PTSA, members of the community, with the Board of Education, Central Office Administration. So We were commended for the inclusion of global and universal skills. When you look at those 21st century skills, these are really things that you would want your students to be able to know, to demonstrate, and ultimately to master. And curriculum was one of the highlights. They thought that we were very strong in the area of curriculum in the report. Authentic learning opportunities. Dr. Smith stole my thunder a little bit, but I was going to allude to the experience we had today looking at these students with their psychology projects. Student inquiry, student research, producing a product, speaking in a lucid manner about their findings, the experimental design that they explored and instituted. Truly impressive work, and I think that's one of the hallmarks of the work at the high school. Rigorous and relevant learning, and then under the leadership of Dr. Charles Smith, certainly the resources and support that our teachers receive to ensure that we've got a dynamic and contemporary curriculum. Instruction, we really do have a great group of instructional leaders and teachers in the high school. The emphasis on inquiry, problem solving, and certainly higher order thinking. The NEASC evaluators go in and they go into, I want to say 96 classrooms, and they observe these in the classrooms looking at the instructional models with the teachers across the disciplines. Certainly very engaged students. We talk about cognitive engagement as one of the primary areas of focus on our teacher evaluation rubric, and then active learn, and students actively learning within the process. They commended us for the instructional coaching program, that we have 2 instructional coaches at the high school, our humanities coach and our STEM coach, who really have been involved in this embedded professional learning opportunity for our teachers, and they thought that was commendable. Slide. In assessment, that teachers are communicating expectations to students beyond the school-wide rubrics, giving students rubrics in advance, giving them learning targets that the students are expected to achieve. So making the assessment processes clear, using formative assessments to try to inform instruction and tailor instruction to, one of the hallmarks in the Wilton Public Schools, one of our overarching goals, personalization. So to use data, from these formative assessments to inform instruction is commendable. And then the variety of assessment strategies. For example, today, these products that these students produced is one example of a variety of assessment strategies. Under school culture and leadership, the safe, respectful support, they couldn't say enough really about the environment at Wilton High School, the way the students interact with each other, the way they interact with the staff. As you may know, we so often hear from new teachers about students leaving the classroom and thanking the teachers, which is common. These students are just tremendous, and our staff, so the climate that we've, I think, succeeded to build, but we're still working on it. Programs supporting, promoting diversity, acceptance, and positivity. One example of which that I'm going to get to is Michael Fowler the other day. The work that he has done with the students, the work he did the other day with the parents, which I think was very powerful. And they did allude to the contribution that our administrative team makes in setting the tone at the top that we're looking to achieve at the high school in terms of our civic and social expectations. School resources, we appreciate the Board of Ed support, the resources you provide that ensure that we can have such a very strong program. The communication strategies with students and parents, they commended this shift from the Library Media Center to the Library Learning Commons, which is in process, and we know that that's something that's going to be very important for our school. And then we have really, such myriad counseling and support services available for our students. Our students who are high flyers, who are heading on to the greatest colleges, students who may be at risk, students in the middle. I can't really go beyond these commendations for our school counseling staff, our school psychologists, really all the people that support us, the social workers under Ann's leadership and our leadership. So tremendous support services. And in community resources, the wide range of programs that we have, the funding that we appreciate from the community, the town, the Board of Education, the central office, and then the long-range budgeting and the planning to ensure that our plan is sustainable, that we're going to be able to continue to have such an outstanding high school through the entire decennial cycle. So those were some of the commendations. Perhaps even more importantly, this right here is, when it comes to NEASC, this is the big charge that is challenging to attain, and I say that based on my conversations with principals throughout the state, my recent conversation with all my FCAT colleague principals. Designing school-wide rubrics through which you can capture, evaluate, and report out on your school-wide expectations in a thoughtful manner where you can have all students demonstrate these 4 skills is a challenge. And we've been engaged in conversations around some of the different models. We haven't reached a decision yet, but we've looked at what neighboring schools are doing. I have some very good ideas myself that I think we can put into place, a vision for the process. But that is really a challenge that we need to find a way to, to catalog these expectations, be able to report out to students and families. This is something that we will continue to work on under our and Chuck's leadership, just the continuous review and alignment of the curriculum. I think we've made some tremendous inroads so far. We have some very important content areas coming up, but that is so critical to align the curriculum, really not just at the high school, but K-12, that articulation. So that's something that's a recommendation that we'll really, drill down into further and continue to work on. Professional learning time, we heard this a little bit even today from our teachers, it's so limited in the grand scheme. When you think about the few days where you have professional development days that are totally allocated to professional learning, and then the few late starts, and then your IET time, we really need to ensure we're being extremely thoughtful and planful about how we're using our PD time, and does it align with, for example, the district vision? Does it align with the school vision? Does it align with our priorities? So that's really going to be a challenge as we look towards next year. We have a committee that's done a lot of work, but we're going to be introducing BYOD. So how do you thoughtfully meld all these initiatives and help them support each other is certainly a recommendation. We recognize that we need to review and revise grading practices. Some of those conversations are going on right now within departments, but one of the areas of growth that we've talked about to some extent here, certainly at the administrative level, is how do we align grading practices certainly across sections of the same course, so that it doesn't matter who you have when we push the magic button scheduling on Power School, that you're not going to be graded dramatically differently by one teacher and the other. And those conversations are already going on, but we as an administrative team are going to force them and continue to guide them. So that's a big element as well. This is something also that we certainly heard when you read the NEASC report, both the self-study and the report that we just got from the commission. This is it right here, the visiting committee report. Time for teachers to collaborate, and so we need to devise some thoughtful ways. We're looking at the Bell schedule, the master schedule, looking at how we use time with our Wednesday meetings so that we can ensure that teachers have time to work together. We heard that again today. It really resonated with the faculty at the high school. Technology and support and Wi-Fi is a growth area. I know you're going to hear from one of our leaders here tonight. It's a little bit of a mixed sample at the high school. There are some areas where it's improved, some areas where we still need to grow. And as we look toward BYOD, we have to all work together to ensure that when we push the button next year on the devices, on the Chromebook carts, on the smart boards, everything's functioning well to optimize our students' learning. So that's a recommendation actually from the commission. Greg's going to talk a little bit about this. We've made some progress with SRBI over the last 2 years. I think we've really come a long way, but we need to continue that process so that we ensure that our regular, really primarily our Tier 1 instruction that is geared to all our students is personalized and meeting all students' needs, so that fewer students are referred to Tier 2, Tier 3, and then potentially ultimately support services. So that's a recommendation. The school counseling curriculum, I think you had a presentation recently from the grade 9 flight directors, I'll call them, Debbie Marino and Pam Scott. We've done some work, the Teaching and Learning Committee has. We've done some great work, I think, with the initial elements of a developmental guidance model, but we'll keep working on that. And then that we continue to move on with the Library Learning Commons as a recommendation from the Commission, and we will do so. We appreciate the addition of another library media specialist to the budget process. We're very appreciative. So some of the next steps. This is really a concise portrayal of the next steps here. We have our school-wide rubrics in place. They are very much in the piloting phase right now and perhaps a little bit beyond. Some teachers are using them. We need to really start to use them systemically and then review and revise them. Make sure that they're really comprehensible to all members of the school community, including students, families. That's going to be important. So we're working on really right now our 2-year plan. Greg will talk a lot about that. And what we want to do then is just through the work of our follow-up committee and certainly the work of our instructional leadership and administrative teams, how do we develop an action plan so that these recommendations are actionable? And then I really already talked about that. Just how do you make these school-wide rubrics come to life in the school, and how do you report out on them? So those are some of the commendations, recommendations, and next steps. Next slide. This is, you'll recognize some of these illustrious teachers. This is the follow-up committee. I would point out that they volunteered for this job. They actually said, I want to go and do NEASC, which isn't always the case, Christian being one of them. You'll recognize that we have good broad representation of many of the content areas. I do want to get a social studies teacher on board, and Christian has done some great work, and he's going to talk a little bit about the work he's done with his colleagues. So Christian McCarthy, our Board of Education.
Thank you. And our committee is, as Dr. O'Donnell said, is a good makeup. We have a lot of people who have been at Wilton, but a lot of teachers from other, like myself as a new teacher. I have experience in other districts, and that has brought a lot to the table in terms of our discussion. Our first look at the report, we broke it down, and each of us paired up and took a section and got into it in detail and tried to really break down and get into the details and see what that meant and make sure we got the context for the different recommendations and accommodations that we had, and had a discussion to look at some themes, some of which we pulled out. And then from that, because a lot of them addressed similar issues that the instructional leaders' 2-year and 5-year plans addressed, the bulk of our work has been taking the recommendations from the NEASC report and mapping them on the identified priorities that the instructional leaders have come up with. Through the course of that, we're able to get into one document that ties the two together, and most of them were already being addressed. There's a few areas we put in terms of culture, in terms of assessments and things that some of the NEASC reports expanded that document a little bit. We finished going through the recommendations and mapping those onto the 5-year and 2-year plan, so we can get it back to the instructional leaders to work forward from there.
So Greg is going to talk about the 2-year plan, and NEASC requires a 2-year plan and 2-year follow-up reports, 5-year plan and 5-year follow-up reports, 7-year plan and 7-year follow-up reports, and then you're into a pre-self study already for the following decennial cycle. Greg.
Hard to believe it's already coming up on us. So yeah, I'm gonna really just kind of provide a little bit of detail as to where we are in meeting all of these recommendations as far as, you know, the 2-year plan that Christian was referring to. What we did was when we initially created that document last year, we looked at themes that were more relevant to us as a school rather than breaking it down into the more arbitrary, the constructs that NEASC imposed, just to make it fit with what we're doing. So some of these things might not look like the NEASC standards, but we kind of categorize them a little bit differently. So as far as, you know, this is the common theme, is this, you know, taking these school-wide expectations and creating a rubric that can measure student progress. We have the rubrics, that's a good piece. We have actually departments now using these. We have the biology teachers are all using the school-wide rubric and as part of their goal setting for the year, and they're in the process of that right now. And as far as investigating methods of collecting and storing and what's going to happen with all this data as we, you know, scale it up and start to use it school-wide, we're engaged in the conversation in the follow-up committee. One of the things we're looking at is taking some of the work that the Chromebook pilot committee did last year, the pilot cohort did last year, which really culminated in an electronic portfolio that, as they were working on it last year, tied to the loose rubric that we had developed as of last year. And at this point, we're thinking about that might be a good vehicle for measuring and collecting all of this information and reporting it out somehow. So that's where we're going with that. You know, we've just started that conversation. That will be over the next couple of years. As far as curriculum goes, we actually have, at this point, the work that the science department is doing with regard to the next generation science standards as they're going through that curriculum review process. That seems to be a logical place to really start working on this idea of embedding these into the curriculum documents. And as a result of the work that the science teachers have been doing this year, starting at the very beginning, Trudy Denton, our STEM coach, was instrumental in this, in taking the next generation practice standards and aligning them with those 21st century expectations that we have for our students. And it was actually a fairly close match anyway, and she just made that work as a bridge between those two processes. So I think that going into the curriculum review, that's going to be really, really helpful, especially since the science teachers will already have used them in this piloting of these next generation science type activities that they've been working with so far this year. As Bob already mentioned, we have a very well-rounded professional learning committee that consists of a representative from every department in the building and even some of the classified staff. They've actually started by creating a survey that they did at the end of last year, at the beginning of this year, collecting information on the needs of what the teachers felt they needed. As we go forward, they've actually created a plan for next year. And now as we see BYOD coming on, and we know that we're gonna have to kind of work with that as well as far as our professional learning needs next year, the task for that committee really is to now take and figure out a way to embed those BYOD training modules with what the teachers have identified as their needs and make something that's relevant and meaningful while still including all this, larger external school-wide needs into the professional learning and involving the coaches, of course. The grading practices came up. It was actually not necessarily specifically referred to by the NIAS committee as we identified it in that top bullet as far as the consistency across departments. They did notice that, they acknowledged, the committee acknowledged that we have those conversations and have been having those conversations within the departments for consistency of grading of departments, grading practices, from course-alike groups. But at the same time, we identified as a faculty in our self-study last year, and we kept that in here, that we want to look at that more at a school-wide level. And of course, the committee added the piece that we really need to make sure that those practices align with our core values and beliefs. The assessment piece, again, largely revolves around the school-wide, using the school-wide rubrics to measure student progress and embedding that language and those types of ideas into our assessments on a more classroom-based level. We like to look at those. We started talking about those bottom two bullets as far as a formal process to actually analyze assessment data and providing teacher collaboration time. As we think about restructuring IET time next year, we're really looking at developing further protocols for looking at student work, for analyzing the work that students are doing, and really using that to calibrate instruction, not just within the departments, but really across the school. The Bill Preble work plays heavily into the school culture and school climate plan that we have. At this point, we've been working with him for over 2 years now. We've gotten a lot accomplished, as you'll see as we look over our action plan. Then really the next step for this part of it for us is that second bullet where we're really trying to take what we've learned out of working with Bill Preble, out of all the work that the student leadership team, Project Change, has done, out of all the work that the adult design team has worked with the student leadership team, and taking that and bringing it down to the classroom level and really allowing students some voice and choice in what happens in their learning. So that's really the big push for us in the next couple of years, is to take that and make that real. And then finally to continue to provide opportunities for teachers, students, and parents to be part of the decision-making process. I know that these committees that we've actually kind of created at the beginning of this year that meet on alternate Wednesdays is a large part of that and really gets the teachers involved in a lot of the bigger decision-making at the school. Bob already spoke about SRBI. We have a fully functioning data team now. We have an SRBI team at the school. We have reading interventionists. We have a math interventionist. That's all moving forward. We've made a lot of progress in that area. And a big piece now is to just kind of continue to target professional learning, especially including the coaches, to really implement that kind of work into what we provide for teachers as far as Tier 1 classroom intervention. And the school counseling curriculum, again, is something that we've been working on. We had a very successful first year with the flight program. I don't know if Debbie and Pam mentioned the link crew aspect of that, but that's really something that we're moving forward with that as we look at this past year, review, revise, and refine what we're doing for freshmen as they come up to the high school. And that's really where our attention is still focused with regard to this for the next couple of years. And then finally, they did make some recommendations regarding technology. A lot of that work has already started. And I guess we're gonna hear tonight on the progress and some of what's gonna happen coming up with that. And, you know, they were, recommend that we continue our work with the Library Learning Commons and making sure that that aligns not only with the K-12 curriculum standards and outcomes, but also ties in with the core values and beliefs and our learning expectations. And I think Bob has some concluding remarks.
In fairness to the board, beyond Ms. Schrum and Ms. Rothstein, Link Crew is a name that you're gonna hear. It's a student.
Shh, don't tell them.
Don't tell?
No, I'm kidding. Is there a question in the
It's a
quiz
student
about it?
leadership program that we are going to, we've identified a cadre of upperclassmen whom we will train in this Link Crew, and the vision is you link upper class students with the freshmen, at least initially. So we've identified the cadre of students. We're preparing, essentially working out the calendar to conduct the training, and then they would be part of next year, you know, part of the flight program. We're working right now on having them be a large leaders in our freshman orientation program. I sent Kim Zemo, Debbie Marino, and Pam Scott to this training about a month ago, and they came back and they had drunk the proverbial Kool-Aid, and they were very, very enthused. So we're gonna make that happen, and we think it's gonna be good for our school and our kids.
I just wanted to add that while they were at that training, I was at a meeting of the student leadership team with students from our school, and one of the largest conversations we had during that meeting was a conversation where they were proposing exactly that. They were saying, you know, we really need to get students to be helping with the advisory program, students to be helping with freshman orientation, and they were trying to devise their own way of how to make that work. You know, lo and behold, 3 days later, Debbie Marino and Pam Scott were back with a whole program already made, so it was actually pretty fortuitous timing.
It was, and they presented to the faculty already. So to state one of the obvious conclusions, we've completed the self-study, the school visit phase. You were part of that May 1 through 4 last year. The comment I want to make is that was no small task for the Wilton High School faculty to accomplish, in addition to and with all the other things that they were doing. I mean, I think our faculty really stepped up in that regard. I think they embraced the process. It was huge to be able to leverage technology in Google Docs, but it was just a number of hours involved. It was the most fluid and effective self-study process I've been involved in. I'm on number 4 right now at this point. So we successfully completed that, and we're at the point where we're looking forward towards the 2-year plan. We've already talked about this, but I want to apprise the board. This task of measuring these 21st century learning expectations, being able to record them in a thoughtful and thorough manner, can be a bit Herculean. I have yet to see a school that does it really well. I was talking to the FCAT principals at the legislative meeting last week, and you know, no magic solutions here. I mean, it is a challenge. And we looked at, for example, one of the schools nearby. They have a system where they have their 3 expectations. They have a pull-down bar, and what is reported out to students and families I found fundamentally vacuous. I thought if you're a parent receiving this feedback on inquiry, it just was not really thoughtful. So part of the vision, as Greg said, is if we can develop through this electronic portfolio some way to capture student work that demonstrates, for example, the inquiry process, and do it in some systemic way so it's not so burdensome for students and for staff. For example, to embed an assured experience on inquiry in U.S. history, for example, or in biology, that may be the direction we're going, and that's the seed that I've planted essentially with the follow-up committee. So we'll, you know, I think also we'll continue to look at other models, but that is going to be a significant charge for us. And the challenge will be time, as our teachers alluded to today, the time and the demands and the ability for professional learning time. So what we have to do is find some way, it won't be seamless, but some way to integrate all these initiatives. Chuck used the term initiative integration early in his tenure here, to make it meaningful for students, to impact ultimately student performance, which is our charge, and then not so onerous for teachers, that we can really focus on what's important, which is personalized learning, student learning outcomes, learning targets, and that's going to be the challenge we face, but we're up for it. So thank you to our Board of Ed for being part of this, the self-study process, the visit last year. As Chair Nick Spera, Dr. Spera said, it's not that often that the entire Board of Education shows up to that meeting that day, and that was powerful. It was a powerful testament to your commitment, so we thank you very much on behalf of Greg and Christian and the entire faculty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions, comments? Again, congratulations and thank you.
Congratulations.
We now move on to the strategic improvement action plans.
So I wanted our four principals to just come forward and update the board on the work that they've been doing. You'll recall last October, November, they were here, and as part of our broad strategic plan presentation, they had building action plans that they put together based on very particular targets that are embedded in our district scorecard. So they're just going to, we don't have the metric data yet, we won't have that until the summertime, but I wanted them to just take a few minutes and share with you some of the work that's been underway this year in service to achieving the goals that they set. So we'll start with, what's your handle these days, the Coonster? She's very nervous about presenting to the board, we talked about this yesterday.
Yeah, because we're vicious.
I know.
But you should know that most of your time was chewed up by Dr. O'Donnell, so you only have about 30 seconds.
Great.
Right, wasn't that great? We told him, stretch the knee out.
Because Mrs. Coon is really like introverted.
I was just gonna
shy.
say, because she's very shy.
Yes.
People,
Exactly.
and I just wanted to say, I asked that parent to hang out in the Wilton Market until one of the board members came and say something nice about kindergarten orientation, so that will work. So first I want to say at Miller Driscoll this year, I think it's been the year of the letter C. So when I did my entry plan meetings with the teachers, a lot of things came out of those entry plans, and they all kind of started with a C. So issues around culture and climate, communication, and consistency. And so then the two Dr. Smiths hired somebody with the last name Kuhn to go along with the assistant principal whose last name is Cross, and then I hired another assistant principal whose last name is Carly. So I'm just telling you, we have a little theme going on here. But
And she left out
it's really
construction.
good. Pardon me?
Construction.
Oh, that's
right.
There we go.
See, it just keeps going.
Yeah, keeps going.
Oh.
So I'm gonna be able to brag tonight about everything we've done this year at Miller Driscoll, but I have to thank all of the people back at school, because they're doing the work every day. So I'm gonna walk very quickly. We said we'd each take 5 minutes, and so I'm gonna give it my best shot. Ready, Jen? Are you gonna?
Yeah, you're already like 2 minutes in.
Oh my
That's a rough crowd. I like it though, being the time cop, I like it.
All right, so the first part of our plan was looking at Reader's Workshop and ensuring that we had all the components of Reader's Workshop scheduled into our very packed schedule at the elementary level. And so we did do that, and we're kind of at, oh my gosh, another C, compliance with that. And I think what we learned after kind of achieving that goal was that what we needed to do now for next steps is look at ways that we can kind of utilize those components across different disciplines. So even though we got it all scheduled in, it still is hard to fit everything into the elementary day. And so now we're looking at the next step of saying, okay, how can we use those components to maybe a Reader's Workshop component to address something in the social studies curriculum or the science curriculum. So that's kind of where we're going with that. In regards to map data review meetings, which was the next thing in our plan, we did have map data review meetings the first 2 times after we administered the map. We're still finishing up the map for the 3rd time. And from that came a list of students that were then brought back to our SRBI meetings, which happen every other week. The teachers reviewed the map data, but then knowing that that was just one data point, they looked at the other data they had on students and decided who needed to be on an official intervention plan. So that was done. We did establish a professional learning committee at the beginning of the school year. That was the one thing that I think was, can't remember what color, I think blue, because it sort of morphed a little bit into the work we did with our leadership team and then with the coaches. So as an administrative team, we were meeting with the coaches once a week at the beginning of the year until very recently. And we did a lot of the planning for professional learning around that. We would bring it to the leadership team, which had the grade level team leaders on it, and share that information with them and get their feedback, and then move forward as to how we would do faculty meetings, IEPs, and things like that.
In math, we did have Bonhar, the teachers attended a Bonhar workshop just like the rest, last summer, and then he actually visited our school and demoed, some lessons, which was fantastic. The next big section of, my plan was around climate. We do have an adult design team that was there when I came in, so that work was, already established. We did review the school climate data with that adult design team, created an action plan, and then shared that out with the faculty. And the biggest addition this year to our school climate work was our student leadership team. And so we have second graders, who you have to remember are 7 and 8 years old, on a student leadership team. And I think we rocked the world of Bill Preble and all of his associates, because they were sort of like, I'm not sure if we're gonna be able to do this. We were like, we can do it, we can do it. So we had about 15 kids on our second grade student leadership team. And again, it took a village, so it took the teachers, it took Elena White, who I have to say on the video here, Elena White did a yeoman's job, kind of pulling together this whole group, sending them out into classrooms where they actually went in and did needs assessments with the classes, came back, chose an area of focus, which interestingly enough had to do with the potty, and that the bathrooms, were a little messier than we wanted them to be. People were maybe spending some time in there, doing some socializing. I know, shenanigans a little bit. But they came up with this whole plan of developing the 3 R's around the bathroom. And so they went into the classes, they presented the 3 R's. We actually had a poster contest where the kids, created their own posters, and then the student leadership team got to vote on those posters. And then those posters were placed throughout the school, and I know, to your shock and awe, also in the bathrooms, to just remind kids about the 3 R's. The next thing they're doing as a student leadership team is they're decorating the garbage cans to be garbage monsters. They came up with a whole jingle that they're videotaping, so it's sort of a public service, a potty service announcement, we could call it. And that'll go on our MGTV and the announcements in the morning. I know. So much fun. So anyway, there we go. When we look at consistency of communication, I'm just gonna start laughing really bad. I started something called a need to know. So it's those things that teachers need to know, that we don't have to have a whole big discussion about it at a faculty meeting. But every week I send something out, Monday morning at about 6:30 in the morning. I'm very particular about not sending it out over the weekend, because I don't want them to have to read it over the weekend. But Monday morning it goes out, and it always starts with celebrations. So it's sort of, what are we celebrating, from the previous week, or things that have happened in the classroom. And then we have something that got added in, behavior tidbits is now a weekly entry. The move is now a weekly entry in the need to know, but other kind of updates about when we're doing map testing, schedule changes, field trips, those kinds of things. And we also start every single faculty meeting with celebrations. Well, not every single one, because there was one faculty meeting I did not start with a celebration, and I was reminded at the end of the faculty meeting by several people, wait a minute, you didn't do what you said you were gonna do. So there we go, they're even used to it now, so they like celebrating. Oh, another scene, there you go, gotta love it. We also developed a mental health team, so taking the psychologist, the social worker, and the guidance counselor, and having them function as a team. So they're kind of their own special SRBI team, where they deal a lot with behavior. We did something called a hierarchy of response, because I found when I came into the school, a lot of the issues would come straight to the administrators. And so we really tried to empower the teachers to say, okay, what are the behavior issues that you can handle in your classroom? What are the things that you're doing proactively, so that we're teaching all the kids about behavior? And then we're gonna give you some support. So those staff members divided up the classroom teachers, and each classroom teacher has sort of their go-to mental health person. They did a lot of training with the classroom teachers, they did training with the paraprofessionals, and then they've done a lot of training with the specialists. Especially around that connectedness factor. Our specialists have, about 450 kids that they see every single week. So giving them some strategies on how to be connected with those kids when you only see them, maybe twice a week for a half an hour, which then improves their engagement. Let's see. We had administrative representation at instructional effectiveness teams, SRBI, then we divided up special ed by grade level. We each facilitate a different grade level of IEP and PPT meetings. I did go to Breakthrough Coach with my secretary Heather, so you can't really get to me until you get through her. She takes that very seriously. Mindset for Learning is still alive and well at Miller Driscoll, and our theme this year was called Celebrating Our Stories. And so the kids do that all the time, and back in December we actually had an open mic morning for one of our faculty meetings where the teachers came up and celebrated stories. Some about students, but a lot about each other, and kind of how they rely on each other. It was very touching. There were some tears there too. And then lastly was parent communication. So that came through loud and clear, especially around the construction and the moving and things like that. But we also had goal-setting conferences with the teachers at the beginning of the year. We send out a newsletter. Let's get some consistency around how often we're going to send that out. And then let's look for ways to enhance that. So we have one teacher who did a Facebook pilot where she had a closed, Facebook account just for her students. And so the parents really love that because there are videos and pictures, and the kids are on there sharing what they do each day. But then we had other people adding to their newsletters, whether it was pictures, whether it was information on an upcoming unit, whether it was here are some little questions you can ask at the dinner table tonight. So all of those things are going on, and teachers just now are starting to pilot Google Classroom, which I know is going on in the upper grade. So we're bringing that to Miller Driscoll. So okay. Any questions? How much time is that?
You're past time.
Thank you very much.
You were entertaining though, so we let you go.
All right, thank you. All right, Jen.
Any questions or?
I don't have any
Okay.
questions.
Okay.
We're saving
Lots
them
of
for you,
questions.
Jen. Jen, we're saving them all for you.
All right.
All the questions to Jen.
Okay, on to ours. So, we actually, one of our first goals really was encompassing of all of our academic areas, and we were focused on the teacher and student goal-setting process. And that really stretched across math, writing, reading, and really was in line with the district improvement plan. And I think that it was a nice way to really slow down a lot of our work we've been doing with reading instruction, our focus on writing, and also as we were working to refine our math program. And it really pulled together a lot of pieces for our teachers. We've been doing a lot of work on conferring, small group instruction, whole class talk, and it really was a way to focus and to target student learning. And we made a lot of progress with that. We will continue to really refine that. I think we've been hearing a lot about trying to slow things down. I think some of the plan kind of gets to that, and I'll explain. But the plan next year is to really think about how to use the IET time. The district really supported us and valued the time for teachers to get together and talk and to focus on planning instruction, looking at data, setting meaningful learning goals and targets for our students. And so we've had that in place for 2 years now at Cider Mill. This year I am amazed at the amount of work that they do. Maybe one day I'll bring a sample of some of the work that happens there, because it's really aligned in 4 different areas. We plan for instruction, we provide professional learning, we look at student work, and we also at times focus on the SRBI process. And our team leaders take a month's calendar and really take the month at a glance and very meaningfully place these different kinds of meetings throughout the month to keep the cycle of teaching and learning going forward. And so our work next year is to really slow that process down. The administrators are planning to be a little more part of that process. This year it was more about learning, and the coaches supported it, and next year the administrators are going to be a little bit more part of that process, and really trying to hold teachers not accountable in a negative way, but to really look at that teaching, the more assessment and instruction cycle. Like, what assessment data are we looking at? How are we looking at monitoring student growth across the year? And really looking at our units of instruction to plan for each child. And so that's really our next steps in that area. The next section you'll see is yellow. we definitely made some great progress in this area. That was about looking at the explicit and implicit vocabulary instruction. There are really two parts to that, so I think I might have been a little overzealous in this goal setting. One part was looking at the vocabulary through the use of whole class instruction. And the coaches had a phenomenal coaching cycle that each teacher worked their way through. And again, you've heard a lot about coaching. We use the gradual release of responsibility. It's in the classroom. It's very authentic. The second piece of that was really focusing in on some of that more academic vocabulary that we see in the MAP and the SBAC assessments. I would say we talked about it, and quite honestly, time just ran out, and we are going to reprioritize that part of the goal and pick up on that. The coaches and I have already sat down and have been thinking about what that work looks like next year. And so we're gonna pick up on that thread, really sticking to the vocabulary piece going into next year, okay? The next goal was all about performance tasks, and we did a wonderful job, made great progress in the math program. We've embedded meaningful tasks along the way throughout every different unit in math. The ELA ones that we had intended were going to be built, and I think Chuck and Gina, we've talked to you a lot about our plan for these humanities-based social studies units that we're planning as part of the curriculum review. And I'm gonna be honest that I think it was in probably October, I had to pull my principal card and say to Chuck that we really were gonna pause the social studies units because we did not have them before the start of the school year. I just, at that point, there was a lot going on in our building, and we really wanted a chance to meaningfully implement it. So because those performance tasks were tied to those units, we didn't make the progress, but we'll be picking up on that, and I know they're hard at work on creating those units, and we'll be implementing them next year. All right, moving on to constructed response. Again, we have a lot of written response in our reading journals. It's great, they start down in probably second grade, it really starts, and then that moves on up into our school. I would say what we have to work on and refine next year is how to take a lot of that jotting and every once in a while meaningfully integrate more of what the SBAC is looking for. And so we're just gonna take what is already happening and the work we did this year and really work on coming up with a school-wide rubric. You know, it's kind of silly, we go from year to year and we've got lots of acronyms for how to create a nice written response, but as a school, we don't have a common rubric or an acronym that we use. So for example, ACE, I'm trying to think what that stands for, that's the one I see everywhere. Answer the question, I don't know.
Cite, right?
Cite evidence,
Right.
expand your thinking or something like that. And so we just have to come as a school community, we're gonna agree on kind of one way, we're gonna do it at Cite or Mill, so that year to year, we're not learning a new acronym, but we're getting to the same idea. So we're just, again, gonna pick up on that thread and really focus on that next year. In math, I'm amazed at the amount of work. I know that was our priority as a district. It sounds small, but they did come up with like a handbook, which was amazing because we've had so much documentation around what good literacy instruction looks like, right? And so finally, the district has a wonderful tool guide for teachers to really understand what a math block looks like and what our expectations are. And the amount of growth that we have seen in instruction and how teachers are dividing up that time. I would say when I was first walking into classrooms, it was a wonderful surprise to see an anchor task happening in the beginning of class. I would say almost every time I walk into the start of a math class, they're doing an anchor task. Kids are talking, they're engaged in the inquiry process, they are doing the work of the math exploration that we're wanting them to do. So next year, our next steps are to really focus on that next chunk of the math block, which is small group instruction. And so we're gonna pick up on the thread. It's a wonderful thing that we've done so much work. The good and bad news of elementary teachers is they have to be good at everything, right? But along with that comes training in one area is often transferable to other areas. So the work that we've done with small group instruction already in the area of literacy will be a nice transfer to mathematics. So we're gonna really build on what they know about small group instruction in one area and focus on that in the area of math. For our school culture and climate, I could go on and on about our student leadership team. I think it's great that the Miller Driscoll actually adopted the 3 R's, so now they're going to be coming up to us with the 3 R's, which is wonderful. This is really the first time since I've been here that there's been some cohesiveness and continuity, and we're really excited to partner with them on that. You know all about our new mascot, and so that was a huge success. We have the mascot that attends our full school meetings. What I think is most amazing, because we have so many kids, not only during the day, but in our after-school club. And what's happened is what, Dr. Smith shared, like that little group of 2 students that kind of took on this project. I need to start a separate book for the amount of kids that come up to me with their ideas. And it is literally, they come and meet with me. Half the time I send them back because they have work to do before they're ready to speak with me. They are like unbelievable what they take on. We had kids who decided there wasn't enough recess equipment, so they fundraised to be able to buy recess equipment. I'm gonna write these all up and give them to you, but there are about 5 students who were involved in that. They raised $600 and we bought additional hula hoops, balls, because they didn't feel like they had enough balls. I had another group, just last week, they fundraised for the Humane Society and had a bunch of food for the cats and the dogs. They just put the bins out. They're in charge of advertising. I had 2 groups that were meeting with the PTA. As you know, we had the pizza and paint night. That was like a huge success. So they want to do cupcakes and clay. So they've got a whole proposal. They've got everything laid out. They don't know where they're doing it or quite the steps in which to go, but we came up with a plan of attack, and they're going back, and it's just phenomenal. And so the sense of agency that I think that this student leadership team has been spreading, and it's just great to see that's not just this one little group of kids. So I think it's a huge success. The other piece of that is our teacher culture. As you know, that's something we've been focused on, and we've been trying to do the celebrating and trying to highlight the great stuff. If anybody was around Cider Mill yesterday, you got to see all of the teachers playing beach volleyball. So we took a staff meeting that, sometimes you just, as much as time is short, we just had a celebration. It's been crazy with all the testing, the MAP, the SBAC, and it was just really nice. We had ladder ball set up. I don't know if you guys know what ladder ball is, beach volleyball, and a bunch of board games for people who didn't want to engage in board games. And everybody was just in there during faculty meeting time, and it was just a really nice time to sit back and relax for a little bit. So we've been trying to find opportunities to celebrate and just really enjoy our colleagues. And then I think our next steps, even though we really did complete a lot of our goals and more, is really to focus on the communication piece. The PTA had done a great survey that we had them include some questions around communication for the school, not only for the PTA. And I would say the greatest bit of feedback for us is still, no matter how hard we try, we're just not communicating as strongly as we would like. So really gonna work with Nicola and Kim, oh my goodness, I'm blanking. Kim Hall, thank you, who was just phenomenal and put together this most amazing survey and spent so much time and energy creating a document for me that kind of disaggregated the school-based stuff. And I'm really excited to take that data to the leadership team, our school-wide leadership team, and really come up with some goals for our next steps. And then finally, the WIN block, we continue to refine that. We're gonna move into researching about the school-wide enrichment model a little bit more and thinking of ways to incorporate STEAM and the LLC makerspace next year. So that's it.
Thank you.
Questions?
I have a question.
What?
Where do you get these principal cards?
I made that one up.
She used it.
I made it up.
Chuck? I got some coming.
But to that point, Jen, sorry, Lori and I participated in the curriculum review committees, and I don't know how well we described them. It's the staff K through 12, and just having sat through one of the science ones, and just so happy that you said let's put like a pause on social studies, because you sit there and you have, especially science, so you have, Jim Lucy's there and he's like, chemistry, no problem, like, you know what I mean? And then you have the second grade teacher being like, oh my Like, what do I have to learn now to teach? So like, as they're changing the standards for science, like she's already had to, I mean, like, so the grade school teachers, they're wonderful, but you know, it's a lot. So every change that you hear about, just picture someone in a grade school room having to do it on top of the math, the anchor, the whole thing. And so I just want to emphasize that, and how I'm glad you played the principal card, and Chuck was
Did we get more of those?
adaptive, right?
Yes. He was great.
Of course. So I mean, I think that that's something that we all, there's not enough time in any of our days, and it's important for all of you to know that.
I'm just so exhausted after hearing what you guys are doing. I think we might need to take a little break.
No wonder our teachers are tired.
I'm saying, it's just, it sounds like a lot of fun, and I'm exhausted just thinking about it. So at Middlebrook, I'll just walk you through what we did. I have a lot of growth to celebrate. We made a lot of really nice strides with the goals that we set. I think we surpassed what we were aiming for in some areas. We started out thinking about continuing the rollout of reading workshops. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing collaboration time and support for 6th grade teachers who were refining their practice since they're in year 2. We also needed to provide professional learning opportunities and support for those teachers in grade 7 who were in year 1. And we actually had our eager learners in grade 8 really going above and beyond expectations, really starting to build their own foundation so that they have a nice schema to start their learning officially with workshop for next year. And so our 8th grade teachers went above and beyond expectations in terms of participating in coaching cycles. They did some really great worthwhile visits to workshop classrooms within the building and beyond to sort of take a look at what that's going to look like, and really communicating with their high school colleagues in terms of what is the right hybrid model, where's that balance to strike so that we really are capitalizing on what the workshop model can give us, but bridge beautifully into what the high school expectation is so that they'll be successful. So we did some 6 sessions of professional development with Elizabeth Lacey, and we didn't initially expect that we would spend some of that time with grade 8, but because they were really rising to exceed our expectations in terms of learning, we were able to do that. We used their department meetings to really unpack standards, to learn about how to use a common rubric as a tool for to guide planning. A rubric certainly can be used for assessment, but it can also really be used just as a lens to help you identify the just right challenge level in terms of next steps for instruction, both whole group and small group. Small group instruction is really something we're aspiring to wrap our head around the best practice for. We had some homegrown professional development opportunities from Gina Dignan, from Andy Cloutier, and from Susanna Prada. And we had some really impactful sessions where teachers were just learning together, so exploring tools, sharing best practices. We have a big focus on what's a replicable practice. So a practice that really is aligned with what we consider to be best practice, having high value for kids, high value for teaching, and that can be used across several texts or across several units. So building the teacher and student toolkit in terms of when they tackle a new challenge. We also had a very dedicated group of humanities teachers who voluntarily created a steering committee to help Gina Dignan in her planning for next steps for the workshop work. And that team had a wonderful opportunity, a really invigorating experience with Kate Roberts, sort of helping to define where we see our vision going, because we really are making thoughtful choices about how much of a pure workshop approach we want to take and how much we want to balance that with a more typical secondary assured text experience. So I think that the teachers have been really critical in that decision making as we go. And when they didn't feel like they had enough time to consult, they volunteered time above and beyond, and I think that it's been really valuable. So Andy Cloutier, Dr. Cloutier has been providing coaching. We've really been looking again at those replicable practices. In some teachers' classrooms, they're still really focused on developing the basic structures of workshop. That's really important, getting those foundations there. And then again, taking a look at how we can use a common rubric. And I think that developing some common language around what we think are the power standards at each level so that we can really have some nice vertical articulation of how the skills develop. In their work, all of our teachers developed all of our language arts teachers developed a focus group of children, sort of a snapshot of their class so that they could use them as sort of a practice group for some of their new learning, and to explore how to bring those practices up to scale in a manageable way. So all of that work, I think, has been really universally successful. I mean, there certainly have been bobbles along the way, which I think is a hallmark of a reflective practice, right? That we really step back and say, that went well, but what could have made it go better? One of the things that was a wonderful achievement this year, the scheduling to make sure that our kids who are in reading intervention do get reading intervention at least 4 out of 6 days in a cycle, but that does not detract from their participation in a full complement of reading and writing workshop instruction, as well as those students are also able to take world language. So that, I think that was a really huge leap forward in keeping us aligned with what SRBI really should be, an additive. We also got rave reviews from our reading interventionists about the adoption of the LLI program, which is an extension of what is a program that's also used at the younger schools. And it is a very nice balanced approach. They're finding it really a wonderful resource. And they've also started using the DAR, which is a very in-depth reading assessment that really lets us learn a lot about our readers. Even if they're not going to stay in intervention, gives us good information about how they can, how we can best meet the needs of those students. So that's, I'm going to wrap that up with ELA. In math, we're really working on that, as everyone is, that constructivist, student-centered approach to instructional practice. Again, really unpacking standards and taking a look at what we consider to be the best practice. We were so fortunate to have Steve Limewon come to talk a little bit about lesson study, do some demonstration, another visit from Dr. Brunhar with demonstration lessons, and of course the follow-through of the coaching. I think our coaching really focused on how do you maximize instructional minutes, and sometimes you do that by minimizing things that are either a little bit more clerical, or maybe using the time that you devote to reviewing homework and things like that in the most impactful way. So and all of our math teachers participated in coaching. A lot of the coaching was done in grade level bands, again, working for consistency. They were really focusing on the areas were determined by the teacher in terms of what is it that you want to get your children able to do, and what do we have to do to have you have success with that. They tended to be looking a lot at helping kids all engage meaningfully in collaborative group work, and also how to implement anchor tasks in a way that is really going to help kids engage in productive struggle, but still cover sort of the information of the lesson that needs to be covered. The math department also, in alignment with the language arts department, identified a focus group of students that they were going to sort of test out their practices on. And in both ELA and in math, one of the things that we did with those focus groups is to say that we set a higher expectation on the amount of growth that children were going to show in their assessment data. So taking a look at, if I really sort of go focus all of my efforts and leave no stone unturned, what can I do in terms of promoting and accelerating growth? And so going forward, it will be how do you bring that to scale and use that level of personalization with all of your students. Again, the general model of intervention in math also changed in parallel to the reading, so that those students are in at least 4 out of 6 sessions, at least 4 days out of the 6-day rotation, and that it is in addition to, not a substitution for, other math instruction. And they continue to use the ALEX program with great success. I get very excited about the school climate work that's going on. As with everyone, we're collaborating with Bill Preble. To me, the really exciting part of the work is kind of like the part that has the least bang and sparkle. All of our teams identified ways that they were going to work to create meaningful connections with students, helping students really feel known and acknowledged and valued. This idea that not only does my teacher care about me as a learner, but my teacher knows me as a person, and that I have an adult that I can go to if I have a concern or a worry at school. So in addition to, so we did a lot of unpacking of the school climate data. We did that both as we had the staff leadership team unpack it. We identified some sort of high value data pieces that we did with the whole staff. We did a lot of goal setting and periodic review of those goals and cross-pollination so that people could share what's working. And a lot of really authentic team-based connections being built. And I think what was really nice is that we allowed the variety of the sort of culture of the team to come through. So it's not homogenized. All of the teams are doing it differently, as long as they feel like they're answering that question of how do I build strong relationships with kids on team. So we had the student leadership team also unpack the school climate data. They set several goals, including they really felt like we needed to work on communication and relationships. So it was a lovely alignment because we were already working on that. They were working on a No Bullies Allowed initiative. So kids taking pledges to make sure that they will treat each other with kindness and respect and try to be an upstander and be there for kids who might be in a situation that's uncomfortable for them. We are in the process of adopting a new mascot and rolling that out. We also, one of the things that the student team really felt that we needed to do was re-articulate what our behavior guidelines are throughout the school, and that just making sure that everybody is playing sort of by the same rules of the game and that the feedback that you're going to get is consistent. And that was something that they identified, and I think the staff agreed was a need, and so we actually, I think like today, finalized what it's all going to look like. I will tell you that we have had every staff member and panels of students weighing in on this. So it's
The big reveal.
I will tell you, it's remarkable. It's remarkable how important it is the way that you word things, right? So yes, so they are working. They have Middlebrook Gem still going on. The No Bullying Allowed contract drive. Oh, they're doing one of the things that they did whole school for community building is a middle school me where they have to guess based on a series of clues which Middlebrook teacher it is that's supposed to be
That's fun.
like how are you how am I like you when I was in middle school, right? We had students leading both staff meetings and some classes talking about words that hurt, trying to help elevate awareness of the importance of using words kindly and how deeply they can impact the people around us. So in addition to Bill Preble's survey that we're going to do for the pre-post, we also had developed our own 4-question survey that I'm very excited about because we're asking all of the students, what did your teachers do to try to build relationships with you this year? What worked, right? And what did we not try that you'd like to see us try? And then the last question is, who do you have someone at school that you feel like you're connected to and can go to with a problem? And if they say yes, they're going to be invited to name those people. They can name as many as they want. And if they say no, then it leads them to an area of sort of like what kind of an interest are you looking for? Who's the last person that you had a tight connection with so that we can try to do some matchmaking. So we will have the anonymous survey that comes with Bill Preble's group, and this is not anonymous because we want to be able to follow up with kids. And I think it's putting kids in the driver's seat in terms of, what worked, and we'd really like to see that push forward our work for next year. That was really lengthy, but wasn't it good? Good stuff.
Very good stuff.
Thank you.
Lots to celebrate.
I don't have any.
I'd be delighted if
Any
somebody had a
questions up there?
question.
Bob, it's up to you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Bruce. Great trio, wow. We had 6 metrics and targets, so I'll give you the quick overview. The first one was to raise the percentage of students achieving goal on the English-based reading and writing. We're in good shape with the English curriculum and social studies in the sense that these SAT skills are embedded in the curriculum, and we recognize that a rigorous aligned curriculum is really how students perform well on these assessments. But we recognize that our teachers start teaching closed reading skills as early as grade 9. That's important, a lot of preparation and expository writing. The teachers gave out pre-release test packets that the students completed, nonfiction writing analysis, And then the teachers working in their IETs actually produce multiple choice questions like the SAT questions that the students completed just to get them ready. So that was an important piece. Teachers used Khan Academy, the online performance platform, to prepare the students for the SAT and use that in class and gave assignments. It's something students can access online 24/7 at home. So I think that will help our students' performance. And then finally, they have departmental rubrics around literary analysis, close reading, annotation, fishbowl discussions, and then argumentative writing. So really the work going on in the humanities curricula, I believe, are preparing the students well for the English-based reading and writing. Mathematics, we're not as advanced as we are in the humanities yet, but we're working on it. The teachers spent another year unpacking and analyzed the pre-release SAT items and embedding them in the curriculum, which we think was going to be helpful to them. Trudy Denton, our tremendous STEM instructional coach, she, with members of the admin team, drilled down into the data on the PSAT and actually put together a packet of instructional tasks that could be integrated into the math curriculum to help prepare the students. So, for example, the teachers did a 3-day mini lesson on probability and data analyses. That's one of the areas where we feel it's a growth area for us. Some of the math teachers would maintain that that's something that's more embedded in stats, in statistics, but we know with CCSS now it's embedded in Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. So we really need to get up to speed with the data analyses and the probability. The teachers did spend some time administering these practice tests with the students, and then finally, just essential test-taking skills. How do you maximize your time understanding directions so that you save time for actually taking the test? Now they say to guess on the SAT as opposed to leaving them blank, making students know that that's one of the strategies, and then obviously just narrowing down and eliminating responses. So there's some targeted work going on, but again, we recognize, you really want a strong aligned curriculum, and that's really how you're going to prepare the students to perform optimally on this Connecticut SAT. Our total school climate score, which was our third goal, we really spent a lot of time at faculty meetings. I think I talked about this at one other time with the board. We spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year focused on school climate, to the point where I think the faculty was like, let's turn the page, but we really forced them to be introspective about their practice, how they're building connections, some of these similar questions about how do you reflect upon teachers who reached you as a high school student, and how can you emulate those skills. So I think it was really a good exercise where we pushed the teachers' thinking and we said, you know what, fundamentally, personalization, school climate, this is our priority right now at Wilton High School. We recognize you as outstanding content area specialists, you're strong in curriculum instruction, but this needs to be the foundational piece upon which we reach students. So that's something that we felt was really, really effective. We did engage in the Harvard model of the student-teacher connectedness activity, where we all went on and filled out this voluminous survey about the students with whom we have built relationships. We had the students do the survey about the teachers with whom they had relationships. We've been working on triangulating the data. It's just been amazing, a massive amount of data. But we did identify a relatively small group of students who really couldn't identify a teacher who they would turn to, or somebody they could identify beyond they needed a trusted adult. So the first step was to say, okay, the advisors, it's your charge now to reach out to them, even further to build that. But we also had faculty members step up. We had the list and we said, I know that student. I see that student. Maybe I see that student alone. I have that student in math class, social studies class. I'm going to reach out and build the bridge. So that work will remain ongoing, but really with, I just briefly commend Kim Zemo and Jim Hunter for their work as civic and social instructional leaders, and Kim as the Safe School Climate Coordinator. We really believe that exercise is going to pay us dividends and is going to help us. In the realm of athletics, Mr. McDougall did put a couple things in here that I think are meaningful. The Captain's Council, empowering our student leaders in athletics. We recognize that some 60% of our students are involved in athletics, so that's important. And then the new Class Act program, which builds upon appropriate behaviors for students and staff in the realm of athletics, that's a contributor to school climate, and that's just one more important factor in the work. Very briefly here, the goal to raise the freshman school climate score we set relatively aggressively from 53% to 63%. And we did that because we knew we built what we feel is at least a good first-year model for the flight program. I know I've already talked about that, but the idea that these students are coming into the high school from our great feeder schools and automatically having a school counselor to whom they can relate, somebody who's going to wrap around them 360 degrees. We all pushed in, the administrators, the social workers, the school psychologists, the school resource officers, the nurses, so that these students could begin to associate names and roles with faces, and that we all play a role in these students' success. It was a pretty powerful experience watching those ninth graders make those associations, so that was important. And then we really have worked to strengthen the grade 9 advisory program. We're going to phase that in. We did a lot of work last year working on professional development and professional learning around the ninth grade advisory program, around targeted learning outcomes, assured experiences, and how do we make sure we're supporting these students who come to the high school, and then build that into, scaffold that into the sophomore year. Some of the parent school climate work, I just want to briefly allude to. I mean, it was a powerful experience last week with Dr. Michael Fowlin here to work with our parent community around some of the challenges that our students face. Dr. Fowlin had presented to the students, the entire student body, I want to say in October, it was a long time ago. And afterwards, Kim and I went up to Dr. Fowlin and said, do you work with parents? Can we bring you in for a parent workshop? Now, it took a little while, but that was one example. I'm going to cite just a couple of them. You know, a good collaboration between the high school, the entire district, the PTSA, the Wilton Youth Council. Some of you attended Dr. Luthar's presentation around privileged and pressured, the risks of growing up in an affluent community. And then the recent panel that we had, where we had social workers and chemical dependency counselors available to parents to help them become further networked, to arm them with information about how to effectively support their students. Those, I think, are just 3 examples where we're trying to reach out to the parent community and really develop this partnership where we're saying, you're welcome into our school, let's go, let's partner, let's take on these issues and arm you with information so we can work together on them. So that's one of the areas where we're trying to work on the parent school climate goal. And then regarding the faculty, you know, it's become increasingly clear, certainly, that our faculty, we need to support them, nurture them, feed them. We've heard that from some of the faculty members. So some of the things that I think have been effective in our school, I started a professional learning committee to give teachers ownership and buy-in, essentially, and feedback on what we're doing in terms of professional learning. I think that's gone a long way, just to hear their voices and know that we want to know what's going to work for you at the classroom level. And then we also have basically a faculty council now. So we have a large faculty council where the teachers can get together, discuss issues they're facing in terms of, it could be curricular issues, issues of time, issues of school climate, and they've had opportunities to bring them to my attention, and we're trying to address those. So I think, again, just the fundamental practice of listening to the teachers, I think, lets them know that we really, really care. And then, you can't just underestimate things like this. Very briefly, just these faculty breakfasts that last week we had our world language teachers put on this wonderful Friday breakfast for the faculty. That's an example of a grassroots faculty effort that it really does impact climate, and we're able to go in and break bread, have breakfast with the teachers, and spend a little bit of time, as our colleagues had alluded to, where it's all about the food, where you can bond a little bit and talk about things beyond the instructional core and what's important to us as human beings. So I know they appreciate that. So that's some of the school climate work that we're doing. It's a quick overview, but some of the efforts we're making. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, I have, may I? Not, I didn't ask any of the others, so I'm just intrigued. On the student surveys of connectiveness, and you have someone, and you mentioned the number was relatively small, out of the 1,200 approximate students that are in the high school, did you identify a number? Are there 100 that don't feel that way, or is it 50 or 200, or do you have that number?
Yeah, it's smaller than that, Mr. Hamel. I'll get you the exact data.
Yeah.
It was a first of all, I mean, 1 is too many. I think we have to take that mindset.
Yeah.
But it was a manageable enough number where we're able to look at the data and say, okay, who's gonna reach out to these students.
That's great. I
and
think
work with
that's
them.
that's so key and so critical.
It's a foundational level
Yeah.
it's an entry point
Yeah.
to say we can't have students falling through the cracks.
Yeah.
But I'll get you the data.
No, I think that's great. It's a small
In
number.
looking at that data where students identify teachers, did you get enough information that you're able to evaluate why some teachers may be easier for kids to gravitate towards than others? So are there key learnings there you might be able to use?
Yeah, you know, I think that everybody was identified, but there were some who were frequently identified. So certainly, you know, I know, and our administrative team and, you know, the people who work in the school know the attributes that some of these teachers have. I think you want to accentuate those because some teachers are just magnets and have that magnetism. But I think it's also about, I mean, everybody has something to offer and bring to the table, and we recognize that our students are different. Everybody may not want the extremely extroverted teacher who's going to be. So I think the work going forward is to celebrate some of the attributes that all of our teachers have. And even if a teacher had 3 students that they identified with, well, those are building blocks. And I think it's worth looking at PD as we go forward, again, around personalization and the climate work we're doing, you know. How do we, you know, build those attributes, some of which are innate, you know, but also how do you capitalize on those innate abilities? And that's something we need to continue to work on. Sorry for the long answer, but those are just some stream of consciousness.
Thank you.
No, I think it's typical of the high school because you have such a wide range of students and you have a wide range of teachers. There's opportunity for somebody to marry up, match up.
Right.
You know, may have the quiet, you know, reserved teacher who identifies and relates to the very quiet, reserved student. I mean, and so I think that's great. I think if the number's small, I think it's just critical that in the high school environment they have someone that they can go to if they feel the need. The other question, Dr. Fallon, how many was the little theater full?
Just about.
I would estimate 170 to 200. It was relatively full. We had a good turnout. Yeah.
Is there a chance to get him in the evening? I mean, today, you know,
Yeah.
where we have parents working day. I mean, the parents couldn't get him. He is so remarkable. He's so incredible. And I think if we could do an evening session with him where everybody could come, your parents are home from work, I think it would be well worth it to explore that as a possibility.
Good point. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
And do if he would do an evening session.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. What's up?
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We now move on to the technology report.
This will be a brief report. There's a lot to talk about. Yeah, so I think the board had the opportunity back in fall to meet Eric Hawkinson, who is our tech representative from CCAP. He serves in part as our virtual chief information officer and has been integral in leading the infrastructure development. He's here tonight to just offer a brief overview of the work that's gone on this year and what we're looking forward to next year. So Eric, welcome.
Thank you for having me. This year has been a challenging year, but we've made a lot of progress. I think one of the things Dr. Smith and I spoke about at the start of the year is that we wanted the network to go faster, not slower, and that's something that we've really worked on this year to try and make that happen. The whole goal of technology is really to support the instruction and learning that goes on in the district and also the day-to-day processes of the staff and administrators. And that's really been the whole goal of the work that we've done this summer and our goals going forward. If we look at the 2016 and 2017 school year, we've really been working on infrastructure across the district. We've worked on reconfiguring the switches. We noticed when we were doing the joint rollout of phones at the start of the year with the town that there were some configuration issues, and we were able to work through those in August and September and really increase the speed of the switches in the district. And we were able to do updates. So all the switches in the district have been updated over the course of the year. When it comes to wireless, we've reconfigured a lot of the wireless access in the district. We've doubled the amount of access points at Miller Driscoll since the summer. We have nearly doubled the access points that we have at the high school, and we've almost doubled the access points at Miller Driscoll over the school year. So Cider Mill, we begin that project on the 26th of June right now, and we'll be adding another 65 access points there to double their capacity. So if you look at really the wireless across the district, when it was initially constructed, it was the Merritt Parkway, and it was designed for so many vehicles per day. And what we've done is we've really increased the amount of traffic on the roadways we had, and we didn't actually increase our ability to add on-ramps and off-ramps, if you would. So if you look at last year at this time, if you go back one school year, we were doing 8 terabytes of data, and we had 3,000 users on the network. This year, we did 21 terabytes of data over the same time period, and we did it with only 1,000 more users. To get prepared for the bring your own device and the K-12 rollout, we're going to be looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,200 to 2,000 additional devices a day on our network, which is a significant number. And in preparation for that, we've really done a lot of back-end work this year. So if you look at the server rooms, we've changed firewalls. We've removed some equipment that was redundant equipment that we needed years ago. It was still in service. We were able to take that out because that was a bottleneck. If you look at the Merritt Parkway, they've added 3 lanes in a lot of sections, but they still have 2 lanes going under some of the bridges. And our goal this summer is to make the bridges, expand those so we can actually get 3 lanes of traffic in both directions going in. So the bottlenecks we're removing. We've also started to upgrade a lot of the equipment. We have additional wiring that starts in June. Our phone system will be over to voice over IP, which will actually be a reduction in cost for the district next year as well. And really all these little things add up to actually some big gains here in the district. If you look at this is just looks at our traffic pattern for the school year. And if you look in June, we're at about 500 megabytes of traffic was our average internet traffic here in the district. As we started to make changes in August and October and December, you can see that our averages started going from 500 and peaking at 600 to now we're peaking at 1 gig. We've expanded our network so we'll be able to have 2 gigs of traffic next year, and the changes we'll make over the summer in the back end in the server room are going to support those speeds. So our data usage has doubled since last year. If you look at the same time period, we are expecting to have capacity to support a doubling of that again next year. And we have the ability to bring in additional capacity throughout the school year if need be. So those are really what we're doing in preparation for next year. If you look at the 27 and 2018 school year, the wireless upgrades will be completed across the district. We're actually putting new UPSs, which are uninterrupted power supplies. We had a number of outages in the district this year because the power in the switch closet went off. And it's as if someone turned the lights off in that section of a building or in that wing, or actually we had one that shut the whole district down. So we're really looking to develop enterprise systems and put in enterprise-grade equipment. The equipment we've had was okay, but we had single points of failures throughout the district. The town is putting in a new data center up at Comstock, and we're going to be putting some of our equipment in there with John Savarese, so we have some redundancy. So in the event of us losing a server room, the entire district won't go down. We're also going to be sharing some internet connections with the town. So if the Board of Ed internet connection goes down, we'll have a secondary internet connection to give us access. So we're really looking at trying to reduce the single points of failure spots that we have in the network, and trying to do that in a way where we can share some of the resources with the town, so it's not an additional cost to either one of us. Another thing was district software. We've really looked at trying to find district licensing. So each of the schools use specific software titles, and we've tried to combine those into district licenses to conserve cost. We've also looked at some district software that will allow us more of an enterprise management. So instead of us going to every workstation or laptop to do a repair, we can do a lot of that remotely next year. The same thing with many of our Apple devices. We'll be able to more effectively push devices across the district and not have to go to every device to set them up, which will save us a lot of time and will give us better just-in-time support. We also have a big change in how we're going to support technology next year, and that really has to do with the Learning Commons. We've worked very, very hard to come up with a plan that is going to allow the K-8 devices where we're looking at one-to-one. Those devices will be able to, a student has a problem with a device, they can go to the library, they'll be able to check out another device as that device is repaired. And if a teacher has a device, issue with a device, and they have time, they can send that into the library and get a spare device. We find that sometimes, if there's a device that someone has an issue with, we can't get a technician. We have 4 technicians. We can't get them immediately. But if someone can walk to the library, swap out a device, and they're back in action, that'll give us a little more time for the break fix, and we'll keep them with the technology they need for the instructional setting. One of the things we do have is continual upgrades. So as we go into next year, we're working on some of the infrastructure. The year after that, we're going to start looking at switch and wireless upgrades. And we really need a plan across the district to continually upgrade the infrastructure, because as the technology becomes used more and more throughout the day, and we rely more heavily on the technology, we need to make sure that we deliver that technology in a way where people expect it to work and it works. That's really our whole goal. I don't want people coming up to me and saying it doesn't work. I don't want people coming up and saying to me, thank you very much for the internet working today. It just should. When you walk into the room, you should have internet, you should have electricity, heating, or cooling. It just should be an expectation. And that's what we're trying to get to. We're not there yet, but that's our goal. I think this gets us to just talking about technology and what a typical replacement plan would be. Typically, as districts look at replacement, you look at the budget and you look at how much money we have in the budget, and then, are we going to buy computers or tablets or Chromebooks? What are we looking at? Typical recommended replacement cycles are 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 7 years, or more than 7 years, depending upon the equipment we're looking at in the district. What Dick and I have worked on this year is coming up with a way to start level funding the technology purchases in the district through leasing on a 4 to 5 year lease schedule, which will allow us to balance the IT budget so we don't have large dips and raises in the IT budget, and allow us to go into a different purchasing model. If we just go to the next slide. What we're looking for the district replacement plan going forward is we're looking to look at the age of the equipment. We're right now doing a full inventory of all the IT equipment in the district. We have a fairly accurate count, but we're going back through to make sure that we're as accurate as possible before we do our summer purchases this year. But what we can do is, instead of purchasing computers for, I'll say Middlebrook, and buying Middlebrook devices for the entire building, it might be more instructionally appropriate for us to purchase devices for just the 6th grade this year. And next year, we purchase devices again for the 6th grade. And the year after, we'll purchase devices again for the 6th grade. So those students have the same device for the 3-year life cycle of that device. And we can look at some of the other schools and make those same decisions. What this allows us to do is, instead of having to buy hundreds of devices for one school and then hundreds of devices for a different school, we really can look thoughtfully at what devices are needed and come up with a thoughtful replacement program for the entire building. So instead of doing all the smart boards in the building, we may want to do a grade level every year in the building, because it's if we budget for that and we know we're on a 7 to 10 year timeline for replacing smart boards, we can purchase a small group of smart boards every year. So we are always current, or always working towards being current. And that's really what we're looking at. It is to end up with a level funded technology budget with not a lot of up and down movement in it, and then an expectation at the building level that you can expect we're going to be replacing equipment in a time frame that is realistic and responsible.
Questions, comments? Great,
I was
thank you
just
very much.
kind of related, what's the status of the student help desk course? This is a question for Bob.
What's the status of it?
Yeah, did we,
Yep, we ran it this year.
Uh-huh.
We actually had Lauren Cantor, who's one of our Spanish teachers, teach it. It was right at the front of the entry into the library media center here, Library Learning Commons. We had students enrolled in the course, and then we had faculty members actually come and participate in it as well. I think it'll be a more active model next year as we go
Okay.
to BYOD.
was it just for the first semester this year, or
No,
has it been continuing?
the whole year.
Okay.
Yeah.
How many kids would you say are participating?
I'll pull it up for you.
Okay.
I have a question, if I may. Your opinion, because I struggle with the BYOD concepts and philosophy. I think as a teacher in a classroom, I would have to believe that it would be more efficient and better for me to be able to teach using the device that every kid has, same device, that functions at the same speed and the same ability, as opposed to having 2 students with a Mac, 3 students with a PC, some with a thing that's 5 years old that's as slow as molasses, some with a smartphone, or whatever it may be. Teaching has to be easier and better and more efficient if everybody's on the same device. Is that a truism or not?
Yeah.
No?
Go ahead.
No,
Okay.
I would say as we work our way through the district, and particularly to the high school, the needs of the device change based on the usage pattern of the student. So a student that is heavily involved in graphic arts or music composition, there is a device that would be more specific to them than a student that is just in working with world languages or mathematics, et cetera. What we're doing, though, is we're looking at the curriculum and finding applications and software products that we can deliver device agnostically. So what we're looking to do is, regardless of the device, as long as it has an internet connection, we can get you access to that software. So the teacher will be teaching using a unified software package and software in the class. And it won't be device specific, but it will run on all the devices students will be bringing.
Eric, just to mention, the other piece though is there is a floor in terms of specifications and minimum standards that,
Yes.
devices that come in have to meet in order to reach that expectation of
The other thing too, relative to that, is that floor, tablets and cell phones are not part of that program.
Correct.
Okay. So what if the student doesn't have a device? Then what?
We have been working to put some systems in place, and students that don't have devices, we will work with them.
Well, wouldn't it make sense? And I have no idea how much it would cost. Every incoming student coming into 9th grade gets the device. We lease it. They have it. They have the devices there. Everybody's on the same platform. Everybody's on the same device. Everybody's doing the same thing. And they keep that for their 4-year cycle or whatever, leased over the time frame. And at the end, if they wanted to buy out the lease, they could do and keep the device, they could, or turn it back in. That seems to me to be a working solution, so we're consistent and everybody's on the same platform, everybody's using the same device. I have no idea what it would cost to do that. I don't know if it's feasible or not.
So how
So
do
one
you
of
think
the-
those kids are gonna feel if you tell them they all have to go to school with the same pair of sneakers on?
With the same way?
That's a different thing entirely. I mean,
No,
I don't
Glenn,
think it
Glenn,
is.
wait.
No?
No, philosophically, I don't
Okay.
think it is. I
Right, fine.
just wanna jump in for a second. What I'm witnessing personally is kids have a level of individuality,
Mhm.
and there's an opportunity for that to be expressed through this program as well. The other side of that, though, is making sure that they have access to an appropriate device, and we have to make sure that we provide that. That's my personal take.
Yeah, no, and I support that entirely. I mean, because we've got to have a base level with that being the objective, that everybody has adequate devices. Why don't we just do it and take care of it? So we ensure that everybody's there, and you have a backup supply in the library in case one goes down, as you were talking earlier. They can just come in that day and exchange it.
Okay, so Glenn, we're also not trying to, so if we have a platform that will work on, you know, whether it's a MacBook or a Chromebook,
Yeah.
et cetera, right? And they've looked into, and, you know, for people who don't have laptops, they can buy it at the school price, obviously sensitive to people who can't afford that. Now, as someone who, you know, I have 3 kids, my youngest one, which, you know, her 25-year-old and 21-year-old siblings were really angry that she owns a laptop, you know, because they didn't have that when they were in high school. But the world is changing really fast.
Right.
And, you know, a parent raised this at Middlebrook, in fact, was like, now I'm going to have another thing to keep track of. And so, like, you know, like we're trying to make the kids' lives a little bit easier, the parents' life maybe a little easier. And so now all of a sudden, if my daughter is told, you had to bring this device, and, you know, and this is something I think Middlebrook is just starting to realize, is like some of the, you know, like the parents don't want to keep track of an expensive piece of equipment. That's not the only reason to do it. But the important thing is that the platform runs on all the devices. And so it's also just, you know, the world is, you know, different. I mean, just the same way there weren't iPhones 15 years ago. And so I think if we were in a community where the kids didn't already have any devices, that would be different. Like when Kevin and Bob and I went out and were in West Leiden, that was a community where the families didn't have computers in their houses, you know. And so BYOD is a nice solution to that. And I think they're covering the, you know, the kids who don't have devices already, as well as the kids who do.
Okay, I guess it strikes me, maybe it just doesn't make sense. I just think having everybody on the same platform, same device would be so efficient from a teaching standpoint, from a maintenance standpoint, from a software standpoint, knowing that everybody's in the same, but it's okay.
Well, I think next year we'll get some really good data and, you know, we can take that under advisement.
And I mean, honestly, the K-8, that is what will happen because the needs and the usage are different, elementary school, middle school.
And it's not going up to 100% the first day of school. It's Fran, and I mean, there's been a 3-year plan worked out, so the first year is trying it out, seeing what happens, and assessing it, and, you know, we're not jumping in over our heads the first day, and it's very well thought out, and, you know, it's being rolled out to the different faculties. Because, you know, and the faculty input and response is really crucial because it's the teachers, you know, how they do it, but they've also, if they haven't heard, they're going to hear that, you know, next year is about, you know, figuring it out and not rushing into it. And if the feedback, you know, we'll see what the feedback is.
Okay, but to your point was earlier, we gave all the teachers the same device.
That's a good point. Part of that was professional development to get them.
So what is teaching?
But some of them don't, some of them use
Huh?
their own devices.
That's right.
But we gave them all, our strategy was to give them all the same device.
We should take this debate offline,
Okay.
because it's a very healthy one,
Yeah,
but at the same time, there are very strong views on each side.
okay,
So, thank you very much.
Thank you.
okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks, Eric.
Action items. Actually, no, Miller Driscoll, we've got school name discussion. Laura, you'd asked to put this on, it was on previously. Well, we had a brief discussion about it at the table. How
I
do
just
we wanna
wanted to-
head with this?
Well, I could start, I asked for it to be put on the agenda because I just wanted to put the question out there to the board and to the community. With the Miller Driscoll construction quickly coming to an end, and with the start of the new school year, a new beginning in this beautiful new building, I thought that this might be a prime opportunity for us to consider the name of the school and whether or not we want to continue calling it Miller Driscoll, or whether or not this is the appropriate time. New beginning structurally, new beginning emotionally, and the learning and everything, maybe a new opportunity to rename the school for the next generation of kids. Because one of the things I wonder, I was around during the time where we merged the two schools, And I wonder if at that time, both of the schools lost a bit of their own identity as to who they were and who they were named for because the signage on the schools used to be the Tilford W. Miller School and the Ina E. Driscoll School. So it was like a real person. And, a student or anybody could say, who was Ina? Tell me, who was that person? Now it's just Miller Driscoll. And I don't know, Kathy maybe can give some feedback as to whether or not there's any discussion that goes on as to who your school is named after, if there's any like identification there, that kind of thing. Because I really question that maybe the identity of who Miller were and Driscoll have been lost. Just reading quickly on the Miller Driscoll website, the elementary is comprised of 2 different schools that were structurally united in 1990 and administratively reunited in 2010. It's very quick, it'll take you. Miller School was first built and dedicated in 1966, named for Tilford W. Miller, who had served as town treasurer and 20-year chairman of the Board of Education.
Go.
Times change.
Then Driscoll School was built to the south of Miller, behind the original school. Driscoll was dedicated in 1969 and named after Ina E. Driscoll, a beloved Wilton teacher and principal from 1926 to 1957. Both were built on the site of the old Benedict Farm, which was purchased in 1961 for a whopping price of $78,000. So that's just a little history, but I really wonder how much of that history does our community even recognize now? So it was just a thought I'd put out there. Now, the interesting thing is, I know we have a policy about naming buildings and what
Yes,
have
we
you.
do.
So on election day, I happened to run into Lynn Vanderslice outside of the Clune, and we were just chatting, and I said, what do you think about renaming that? And we're gonna talk about that as a Board of Ed. She goes, that's for the Board of Selectmen to name the buildings. So there's a fundamental question to be answered if we even go forward with this. What's the process for that and whatever. So I guess I would bounce that back to Kathy as to whether or not, if there's thoughts or feelings at her school about this idea. And then I guess I pose the question to the rest of the board. What are your thoughts?
I think it has to start with a C.
Just start with C.
It has to start with this.
That's all we know right now.
Other than your feelings on this topic, have you come across a number of people that feel strongly?
All I know is that when I mentioned it to people in the community, people tend to say, oh yeah, that would be interesting. And I did talk to Jeremy Cross once during one of our interviewing things we were doing, and his eyes, like he just lit up with the idea of being able to have a new identity for the school and like a fresh start for the school.
But
I don't know if the whole staff there thinks that way or not.
It would be
I just-
hard for the kids to change the name.
It'd be hard for the town. Why don't we just educate people about who Miller and Driscoll were?
I think we could drop the Miller. What do you think, Lori?
No, my kids were from Driscoll, so
Yeah,
I
I
said drop the Miller and keep it Driscoll.
Or drop the Driscoll and it'll just be, it'll be Driscoll again?
I don't think so.
Yeah, because she's a Miller parent.
I know,
see.
that's why I
So
said
there's
that.
a long history for sure.
But the current kids at Miller Driscoll
The current kids
are
don't.
not part of that
No.
history.
So I'm just saying, let them create their own history. And new.
I think it goes back to what you just said, that there are teachers, and again, back to my entry plan, they came in and said, so I taught at Miller, I still am not sure which side of the building is which, but.
It's okay, I don't know which is north and
So
south.
I'm okay with that. But I mean, I could put it out to the staff. I think parents have had different reactions. Some parents have come in having heard it through the grapevine and have said, oh, I heard you're changing the school name. And other parents have come in and said, I heard there's talk about changing the school name. So.
And as someone who
Mary?
lived in Wilton, in the 70s when Middle School East and Middle School West were renamed Cider Mill and Middlebrook, my older siblings and sibling-in-laws still talk about Middle School East and Middle School West. And to me, they're Middlebrook and Cider Mill, I have no issue with that. It doesn't seem weird that my sisters they think they went to different schools. We did make that change. It was a simpler time. And all that. But,
Well, I wonder, to your point where you say that some teachers still identify to one school versus the other, I wonder if now that this is one way to unite those groups, because there is no Miller versus
But the
Driscoll
new
anymore.
teachers won't feel that way. They'll be Miller Driscoll teachers.
Or there'll be new, whatever the new school name is.
So, where to go from
Just-
here?
I have no idea where to go.
My first question would be, how big of a problem are we solving?
Right, is there a problem?
And if we believe there's a large problem, how do we go about solving it?
Well, the
Well,
policy
I
says
don't think it's a
to form
problem, I think
committee.
it's an opportunity. I think
Yeah,
problem's the
you
wrong
see it
word.
more as an yeah.
I think it's an
Fine,
opportunity.
we have plenty of work in front
Yeah.
of us. My
Right.
question is, on our list of priorities, is this one we really wanna take
But
on?
it's an opportunity if we chose to accept it.
Then why don't you two form a committee and explore it?
You too.
It means
Well,
nothing, I
you're
don't,
the ones,
I,
you see the opportunity.
no, I'm just saying it is an opportunity, as Lori said. And that's all I'm saying, I don't think it's a problem, it's an opportunity if we choose to pursue it.
Well, and I would, if, not to get the ball and pass it, but I would pass it back to Kathy and ask her if she would go back to her school
Okay,
and
so
bounce the idea
the
around.
only challenge that I have with
Uh-huh.
that
Except it's
is
the
the
town.
school belongs to the community.
Yes, I know.
And that represents a small portion of the population. There
Yes.
are generations
Right.
of people going back into the sixties that graduated from Miller or Driscoll, and they're named after people who
Meant-
were substantial figures
Right.
in our history. And we are asking ourselves, do we want to erase that from the front of one of our buildings? I think that's a big question.
Right.
Do I personally care? No, because I think it's a fantastic school. You could call it green, you could call it purple. I think the reality is, the magic of that school is what happens with those teachers and those kids and those families. So to me, I personally could care less. But it is the will of the board that will decide whether or not we want to pursue this and how we would pursue it. So that's what I would put out to each of you to think about. It's on tonight as a discussion topic. We'll bring it back for a decision on whether or not we'll pursue it in a more structured fashion. Does that seem reasonable to everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, wonderful. Next meeting is scheduled.
No,
Oh.
the action item.
I keep doing this, don't I? So, action items, we have discussed and approved policy 1430, 1440, policy and regulation on activism on federal and state legislative regulatory issues.
Yep.
It was on previously as review and discuss. Are there any questions or comments on it?
I move we approve.
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Was that I approve or I?
I mean, I was just late to say aye.
Okay, so it passes.
But I want my vote to count.
Okay. It passes unanimously. Now, as we do at the beginning and end of every meeting, we have opportunities for comments from the, I did that again. Our future meeting is scheduled for May
He's
25th.
just
We
like
have a
one foot
problem,
out the
though.
door.
Tom,
here.
actually, our future meeting is scheduled for May 25th, and we're gonna have to reschedule it because we have a number of board members traveling, so we won't have a quorum. So we'll look at either canceling it or rescheduling it. I can now move on to comments from the public. As I do at the beginning and end of every meeting, there's an opportunity for people from the public to come speak. Is there anybody who would like to?
Or one.
Okay, seeing none, I look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Smells, make sure I just jumping items.
Do you, yeah, why don't you just, when you get a chance tomorrow, just make a copy.